My first experience with ayahuasca specifically, I was with people that essentially didn't really necessarily know what they were doing. I spent most of the second night in the bathroom in extreme terror. I was in such a panicked state that I had a panic attack and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't tell them that I couldn't breathe. That all was a result of being overserved. It was like very dark, very, I want to say like grimy. That was like every ceremony and like almost everybody's experience, just like being thrown into this really dark, low vibrational space because the person that is holding the space, that's there every day. It's such an important responsibility to make sure that you're in integrity and you know what you're doing and that you really have the interest of the people that you're serving as your top priority.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am so excited to share this episode with you today. In today's episode, I am joined by my beautiful, dear friend, Akasha Kimeya, to discuss the incredibly important topic of abuse that can happen in ceremonial shamanic spaces when the leaders in these spaces are out of integrity. Akasha details some of the experiences she had in what some people would call a plant medicine cult. She tells us about her traumatic first experience of sitting with ayahuasca and some of the experiences that she had while living in this community. Akasha shares the conflicting feelings that she's experienced of having beautiful, deep moments of connection with others in the community, while also navigating the darkness and the narcissism of the head facilitator that was lying just under the surface. In this episode, you'll get some tips on how to spot red flags in plant medicine facilitators, or any leaders really, and how to find a ceremonial space that is safe and held in the highest integrity. We also discuss the dangers of putting someone on a pedestal that can lead you to be unable to see abuse while it's happening. We talk about the importance of self-awareness in any position of leadership and the ways that the ego can take over when that self-awareness is lacking. We also talk about people being attracted to these cult-like energies due to the lack of connection and community that so many people are experiencing. Then when you add plant medicine to the mix, these situations can get very messy and out of hand quickly, and being new to the medicine can also amplify the potential of abuse because you may not know what a safe container is supposed to feel like. It's also very common for people who've already experienced narcissistic abuse or other kinds of trauma to be more susceptible to these kinds of situations because there's an aspect of it that feels familiar, and that is also something we discuss in this episode. This is such an important topic, and I have been wanting to discuss this on the podcast because when you are diving into the plant medicine psychedelic realm, it is of the utmost importance to be held and led by people who know what they're doing and who are truly in service and not in it for their ego. And though the topic of discussion today is rather dark and heavy, Akasha and I still find ways to make it fun, and we share plenty of laughs throughout this episode as well. So I really hope you enjoy it, and let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the We Are the Medicine podcast. Today, I am so excited to have my dear friend Akasha on. Hello, Akasha.
Hello.
I'm so excited to have you. I love recording podcasts with my friends because it's so much fun. And
It's a vibe.
yes. And so we have a very important topic to speak on today, which is very dear to my heart and that I've been feeling called to speak about on the podcast for a while. So I'm really glad that you're here. We really want to talk about shamanic abuse and the abuse that can happen in shamanic spaces, in plant medicine spaces, especially when you have facilitators who are not in integrity or are too identified with their ego. A lot of damage can be done in these situations. And we just really want to give you guys some insights and some of the signs that you can look out for. And Akasha, I know that you have experienced this firsthand. Can you tell us about how you got into plant medicine and your journey with that, and then moving into the community that you are part of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my journey with plant medicine back at the end of, gosh, I want to say like the end of 2020, maybe closer to 2021. It's been about 3.5 years, and it was towards the end of COVID, and I was in such a low place. Like, I was suicidal, I was drinking heavily, I was using a lot of different drugs, hanging out with really bad people, and just I had checked out basically. I was like, this is, nothing really helped me. And I was using a lot of LSD at the time to kind of try to process my emotions that way. And it just didn't feel like it was enough, and I had been working with LSD for a long time. And so I think I was really kind of craving like some deeper, some deeper work. And I had looked into combo, which was like the frog medicine, and that led me to our dear friend. And so I ended up going to my first sit after that. I had like, the last $500 in my bank account, and I was like, I'm getting there. Like, I'm doing it. Like, it was kind of like a do or die situation, really, because I mean, to be so suicidal and in such a dark place where I was like, you know what, if this doesn't work, I don't feel like I have any other choice, So I really like went there with the intention of like, this is my last, effort at continuing in this life. And it completely changed my life in so many ways. And yeah, that was kind of like the start of everything.
That's so beautiful. I think a lot of people come to the medicine in a state like that. Not everybody, but I think it's very common for people to be like, I have literally tried everything. I I don't know what else to do. So,
Mhm.
ayahuasca, please help me.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. I had looked into ayahuasca. I didn't really know too much about it, but it was on my list, and I was kind of like, oh, I'm going to have to go to Peru, and like, oh my gosh, this is going to cost me thousands of dollars. And then out of nowhere, from somebody that I didn't even know very well, she just, grandmother just popped up. And so it felt very, very aligned, very synchronistic. And I believe that she finds you, when she's meant to. So the start of everything, my first experience was, I like almost don't want to use the word traumatic because maybe I'm, gaslighting myself out of that, but it was really bad. It was really rough. I think with ayahuasca specifically, out of these plant medicines, she's a strict grandmother and she can be really rough. But this experience was not, held in the best way. I was with people that, essentially didn't really necessarily know what they were doing. The energetics that were involved weren't taken care of. And I spent most of the second night, in the bathroom in extreme, extreme terror. Um, I can give some more details about that, but that all was a result of being overserved on the second night. So, a lot of places, if they're in integrity, they allow for bodily autonomy and you can choose how much medicine you're drinking. And in this space, it was kind of very much the opposite. It was very much like, half of the room didn't feel the medicine the first night. So this person decided everybody's going to start with 2 ounces and that's what we're doing. And, announced that to the group. And we had a lot of first timers from what I remember. Nobody really knows what they're doing, and you have this person that's in a position of leadership, and you want to listen to them, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into at all. The first night was pretty, not, it wasn't that bad. I've been doing psychedelics for 15 years. I understand that kind of space, and after the first night, I felt really good. I was like, I think I came what I needed to see and what I needed to get from this experience. And I almost didn't even want to drink on the second night. And I didn't know it was an option that I didn't have to. And not only that, I didn't know that 2 ounces is a very heavy dose. I had no idea. I had no idea.
Like, that's
I know
a
that
lot.
now. I know that now. I don't think that I would really ever go into a sit and be like, give me 2 ounces,
Right.
Unless it was like a really purposeful sit. But even then, it's like, I think the prep that goes into asking for that much medicine, the prayer that goes along with that much medicine, like, these are all very important aspects that were completely looked over, kind of from just I want everybody to go really deep, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And then it's like, it's not about being of service. It's not about the people healing. It's about you. It's about that person as the facilitator having that ego of like, yeah, I want you to have a deep experience. And that's just like, that's crazy, dude. Like, I can't think of any situation where that's appropriate to just force that and impose that onto people, especially when they're new to the medicine. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is like, important to say that there was a woman there that did speak up immediately. And, she's a friend of ours, and she was like, no, I'm going to do 1 ounce. Thank you. And that was allowed, and that was in front of everybody. So there was that understanding that, like, if we didn't want to, she wasn't going to, like, pour it down our throats. But
Right.
I think the energetics that go along with, like, being in position of leadership and kind of almost being in this peer pressured situation, unless you know better.
When you're new to the medicine, especially when you're new to the medicine, it's really important to be with a facilitator who is safe and who is down to take it slow with you, because it's always better to have less medicine and like work your way up than it is to just be like, let's fucking go, and like then you have this really really traumatic experience, because you can actually have a really deep experience with like just a little bit of medicine. You actually don't need that much unless that's what you want and that's how, you're trying to go that deep. But I think that that is really good that that was honored when someone was like, no, I'm not doing that. And it's also, I can see how with the facilitator being sort of the authority in the space and they're saying you all should do this, I can see how, especially for new people, they would be like, okay, well, this is what she says that I should do, so okay, I'm gonna do that. It can be hard to gauge, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, this person's so experienced, like they're facilitating this, so they clearly know what's best for me.
Yeah, it was incredibly confusing. I remember being very confused at the time, because I just didn't understand, and I think when you look at it from that kind of viewpoint where it's like you have this person that's the leadership and somebody that's been doing this for many years, and it's hard to gauge. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a really good point to bring up, is that someone could have been sitting with the medicine and studying for 20, 30 years, and that doesn't mean that they're a safe person to sit with. Hey friend, If you are interested in plant medicines, or if you're on the plant medicine path, or even if you just like to work with plant medicines to enhance your spiritual practice, you are going to love Four Visions Market. Four Visions Market has a wide selection of many different spiritual tools that can help enhance your spiritual practice. They have just about anything you could imagine to fit your personal spiritual needs, such as an amazing collection of hape, which is my personal favorite thing to buy from them. Four Visions is my go-to place to get hape, and my two favorites from them are Divine Mother Rose and the Ojo de Jaguar hape. And even if you're not into hape like me, I promise you they will have something you're gonna love. They have a wide selection of spiritual tools with anything from ceremonial cacao to botanical tinctures such as king nettle tincture, which, by the way, nettle is one of the most amazing and nutritious plants that you can put in your body. So everyone needs them, a little bottle of king nettle tincture. They also have some amazing healing lotions, Florida water, yoni steaming blends, tea blends, sananga, and they have an entire line of CBD products, including tinctures, body butters, pain salves, and even a little something for your pets. And the beautiful thing about Four Visions is that every single product in their marketplace is created handmade by indigenous people of the Amazon. And what I really love about them is that they give 50% of their profits back to those indigenous artisans to support them and their families and the tribes and make sure that they are healthy and beautiful and thriving as well. I am so grateful to be partnered with Four Visions. I really believe in their message and their purpose in this world. I love the way that they support and give back to the indigenous communities in the Amazon. And I think it's probably one of the best companies that you could support because they are really doing a lot to help those indigenous people. And I have a special 10% off code for you. So if you click the link in the show notes and use the code Serena Rose, you can get 10% off your first order. Now let's get back to the episode. We all have an ego, and in this work, even in my own journey with this work, it's like so important to be aware of your ego because we all have one, and that ego and that inner child even is like, I want to be seen, I want to be special, I want people to listen to me, I want to be important. And those are all things, especially in like a role of a facilitator, even if you're like a coach, these things can apply not even just to plant medicine, but any type of leadership role. Like, if that ego takes control and you're just kind of in that unconscious mind, it's so easy to just make it all about you. And that's the whole thing, is like, when you're in a role of service, it's not about you. And you have to know how to be aware of that ego and how to put it to the side. Otherwise, people get hurt.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with that is like, it's dangerous because you are essentially taking people that are already in very vulnerable places in their lives. These are people that already have struggled with their mental health. Like, they're coming to this medicine for healing and for a deep reason, typically. So to have all of that wrapped up in it, it's like, it's such an important responsibility to make sure that you're in integrity and you know what you're doing, and that you really have the interest of the people that you're serving, like, as your top priority, and not yourself, not the reviews of like, saying people didn't feel the medicine. So like, am I going to get a bad review from that? Let's just double dose them and like, give everybody this really wild, deep experience. And it's like, not everybody is ready to go that deep. Look at my experience. Like, I had been doing psychedelics for 15 years and I was in such a panicked state that I had a panic attack and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't tell them that I couldn't breathe. And, I spent my time up in the bathroom trying to stick my entire hand down my throat for 4.5 hours, which is a really dangerous position to be in. I'm not recognizing what I'm doing. Like, I could have technically choked myself, hurt myself in some kind of way, throwing myself on the ground, and like all of these really intense, reactions. And I just think about the things that could have prevented that. There's so many,
Mm-hmm. It really breaks my heart, you know. Just like you were saying, when you came to the medicine, you were in a state of desperation. You were like, I don't know what else to do. I've just been having such a hard time moving through life. And so you get people who are already broken down in a way, like beaten down by life and literally just looking for some sort of help. And then to have this experience where the facilitation is not in integrity or safe, it's very like cult energy. If you've ever watched a cult documentary, you know that people who get into cults normally are in that same kind of space. They're desperate, they're lonely, or they're not connected with their family, or they have family problems, and they're just looking for that sense of connection and community. And the saddest part is that these people who are not in integrity, these people in leadership roles, they take advantage of that. And the saddest part is that a lot of those people probably also have already experienced some form of narcissistic abuse. And so then there's this sense of familiarity. It's just like how, you know, if you grew up with a narcissistic parent or an abusive parent, you're very likely to get into a relationship with someone who's abusive or narcissistic because it's a familiar energy. But that doesn't mean it's good or safe. And also, I just wanted to say, from what I've learned, you should never stick your finger down your throat to try to make yourself purge in ayahuasca. Obviously, you didn't know that. You know what I mean? Like, you weren't given that information. But for anyone here listening, from what our teacher has told us, like, you're opening yourself up to like really not good energies. So just like, don't do that.
Don't do that. No fingers in the mouth for any reason. Yeah, I think that's really important to point out because I had no idea. And I think that's attributed to like when I was dealing with my alcoholism and I would be making myself throw up the next day because I was so hungover. And so there was, something was there, but at the same time, I think it's difficult though, it's like, how can you really prep everybody for everything that's going to happen? It's like, that probably wasn't really something that anybody was much thinking of, but it's really important to know, it's technically like disrespectful to the medicine. And it kind of just like sends you on this whole wild ride.
Yeah, but I mean, you didn't know. I think the medicine is also like she's very gracious and she's not going to punish us for our ignorance. I find it really sad that people who are already in the most vulnerable state end up in these kind of situations where they're being taken advantage of and they're just being traumatized even more.
Yeah, and it's also like you said, familiar. And I think the case with what I went through is it was incredibly familiar for me. I didn't think that the space was bad at all. I actually left that space. I had the ceremony, I left, I moved to Florida, and 3 months later, I packed everything back up and I went and apprenticed under her for 4 months. And it was like, I thought it was great. I was like, this is finally, a family, a community. Like I've been looking for this, and then to have the overuse of the medicine, of having ceremony every weekend, it kind of gets you into this blissed out state where like, you're not integrating anything. And it's really easy to kind of overlook things when you're drinking medicine every other weekend.
Yeah, that's that's a whole thing. I mean, I think, in the jungle, I'm sure they kind of do that, right? Like that's part of their lifestyle is they sit with medicine a lot. But I think, especially for us Westerners, like our society is not like designed for that. And I mean, we've talked about it, like integration can be really hard, so sitting with the medicine every weekend, I imagine can be really ungrounding and just like you're kind of living in the clouds, especially if there's no advice or no assistance with like how to integrate this. I mean, I know people who are like, I sat with ayahuasca 2 years ago and I'm still trying to integrate. So it's kind of, like I mean, it just reminds me a lot of the cults. People who have been in cults oftentimes say it was the best time of their lives. Even if
Yeah.
there was abuse and there was, bad things happening, they're like, I never felt a sense of community before. And so many of us are missing that. So many of us are missing that sense of community and friendship and connection and belonging. And when you've never had that and you're also new to the medicine, you haven't sat with anyone else, you don't really know what a safe space looks like, then you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like this person, she's been learning for all these years. Like I can learn so much from her, and I'm finally with people who, I relate to, and it's really, really easy to get caught up. And so I would love to hear more about how that journey unfolded for you to go from, oh, this is great. Like this, there's nothing wrong with this. Like, how did you start to realize like, okay, something's not all the way right here?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to like the familiar part, right? So I come from a really rough background, lots of drug and alcohol abuse, lots of really dark, low vibrational places. And I spent, from 15 years old up until I was, 28 maybe, um, in these really awful places. And so with the ceremonies that were being held, it was like controlled chaos, And so it felt, I was like, I've been doing this for years. Like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. Like, I was like, I got this. Like,
Oh,
we did
chaos?
imagine,
I know
yeah, I was like,
chaos.
yeah, like I got this. Like, I'm the perfect one for the job. Like, And so, the ceremonies could be really, really chaotic in a sense. And there's a lot going on, lots of movement, lots of everything. And the team that I was working with specifically, I'm still very close to the other people that were helping facilitate. And we worked really great as a team together. And the image that I had of this place really didn't start to fall away until maybe like the last two ceremonies that we were holding. And there were some discrepancies on, like my roommate had pointed out, like the money situation and where the money is going, because, it's a lot of money being moved every other weekend through this house. It's all in cash. And, it wasn't really being put back into the space at all. Like it was the same, puke buckets from 4 years ago. And, nothing was really being taken care of in the house. The house wasn't kept up. So that was kind of like the first little thing that I had never even thought about. It had never crossed my mind at all to think about, you're making X amount and like claiming that you're broke and like asking for donations for things from this community. And it's like, you don't need donations. Why are you asking for more money? And then it's kind of like, okay, it's kind of becoming a money grab. Oh, you want to have extra ceremonies next weekend. And it's like, incredibly overworked. I was also working a full-time job at this point for a suicide lifeline. So like I was like tapped out, and it got to the point where I was kind of starting to see these things. And it really didn't hit me completely because I had left, I left on good terms. Like there wasn't anything crazy, and I'd left. And talking about my experience with other people, and I was like, okay, maybe that wasn't like the best, held space. And then I sat with another community. The person that I was dating at the time had come to sit with the community, and he talked to me afterwards, and he was just like, I'm going to pay for you to come and sit with my community because I need you to see this. And I was like, okay, like I'm scared, but okay. And I did. And it was night and day. Like it's like almost, you can't even really explain it, but it was not chaotic. It was held, and it was a safe spot, you know, and even just the music, you know, like playing music on off of like a tablet for hours and hours, you know, that's not necessarily you holding down the space. You know, like the place where we sit now with our teacher, it's like he'll do that during intermissions, like for specific reasons. But with my previous teacher, she would do that pretty much the whole time. Maybe occasionally she'd take out her guitar. And so I went to this new space and they were singing Icaros. And I had never heard Icaros before because that wasn't something that was in the previous ceremonies. And the way that these songs work with the medicine, and it's like, how have I missed this the whole time, you know? And it was such a game changer.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like the music is such a huge part of ayahuasca ceremonies. And there's so many different ways to do it. You know, even in the jungle, there's like the Brazilian style, you know, there's different tribes in Brazil that do things different ways. There's the Santo Daime, there's the Shipibo, there's Colombia, you know, there's so many different ways to do it. But the one thread across all of those is that the music is so key, and it's very strategically aligned to bring out certain things. And that's like one of my favorite things about our teacher, and what I've learned from him a lot is just the ability to read the room and to be able to channel through the music and literally pull things out of people. Like I have literally had things pulled out of me just from him singing. Like,
yes,
and
literally.
that's it's such a huge part of the ceremony. And so, you know, there's nothing wrong with playing recorded music, but
Right.
you know, like we do that, like you said, it's part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also like that is such a big part, the being able to be a channel in that way, and to read the room in that way, and to know what songs to sing and how to sing them is such a study. And it's like so important. So it's crazy and kind of hard to believe that someone who's studied with the medicine for that long, however long, didn't incorporate that. Something else that I also really wanted to touch on is the fact that you weren't just apprenticing, you were also living with this person.
Right.
And that's like a big deal. I feel like that is, unfortunately, it's another tactic that I've heard in many different kind of like similar situations, where this person will have you come and live with them or be as close to them as possible so they can have more control over you. They need to like have an watchful eye on you all the time so that you know that you're under their control.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very intense time, I think. You know, it's difficult because I have so much like, you know, uh, pieces of my heart that are still there, you know, with the property and with specifically, you know, her daughter that was young and that I really connected with. And it really felt like a family. You know, we're living together, we're facilitating together, we're supporting each other. And so we all got incredibly close really, really quickly. And it was really difficult to even leave. And I think that kind of goes back to the cult kind of dynamic where it's like, you know, you can't really see it until you're out of it, because, you know, there were people that were trying to warn myself and my roommates about this person. And I was so defensive. And I, you know, came to her you know, defense and was like, these people are crazy. Like, this is the best place ever. And I think that that's one of the hesitations that I have with sharing my experience, because I know that there's still people that I care about that are in these spaces that's part of this community. And it's like, it's something that I really want them to understand, that like, I understand, you know, I get it. I was there. Like, I gave everything to that community. And not to say even that there was no healing being done. You know, there was a lot of healing that happened there. For myself included, there was a lot. You know, I think the medicine is always going to come through in some way or form, but just the overall like dangerous aspects of this, and also just like being informed about where you're sitting, it's just so important.
It is really sad because people need community, and that's why people are attracted to these cult like energies, because we don't have enough community in our world. Like, this is literally how humans lived for all of our history. People lived in community, people lived with other people had family around and friends and people to support them. We're not actually meant to just be here alone in our houses just by ourselves all the time. We all deserve to have that community, and there's still predatory energy out there. There's still very cult-like figures that can take advantage of you. So that discernment is just really important, because we want you to find your community. We want you to find your people, your soul family, the people that you resonate with, and we want you to be safe. I really feel for you and for anyone who's been in a situation like this, because I can imagine it is really confusing. Because I mean, I always equate it to like being in an abusive relationship, because it's very, very similar. I mean, it kind of is that in a way.
Yeah.
Where it's like, there's things that are happening that maybe you're like, oh, that's weird, or that wasn't cool. But then there's also a lot of beauty, and you see the good in people, and especially you're living in this community with people you relate to, you're having these ceremonial experiences and you're connecting with them, and there's so much beauty, and like you said, there's still healing that is happening. I don't know, it's just such an interesting like duality, where there's like beauty and there's healing, but then there's also trauma and things that are really not okay happening at the same time. And I think that's why it can be so confusing and hard to leave, like you said, just like an abusive relationship, right? It's like your boyfriend like beats you up, and then you're like, wow, that was really fucked up. But then the next day he buys you flowers and tells you how much he loves you and how beautiful you are, and he takes you out to dinner, and you're like, oh, well, maybe this isn't so bad. But it's like,
until you get in another relationship and you're like, wow, that's what it's supposed to be like. It's like, and not until you're out of it, really, or until like you reach your breaking point.
It's also okay to hold that duality, and to be like, I still have love for this person. Like, I still have love for the people that are there, and like, I wish you all the best, and you can still cherish the beautiful moments. And also, like, this is not something that I'm willing to accept or participate in, because it's just not okay. Like, I've had situations like that, not to that extent, but like, I had a friend, I actually talked about this on the last podcast too, but I had a friend a few years ago who we got really deep into like sitting with mushrooms a lot, and she got really into channeling, and it was like all beautiful at first, and then it started to get weird, and it started to get very manipulative and just kind of dark. And like, I had some of the most beautiful mushroom ceremonies of my life with like this person and a couple of my other friends. And also, like, I had some of like the weirdest, craziest things happen, and it just got to this point where I was like, like, we can't, like, this is not it. Like, I don't know what kind of energy you're working with or what you got going on, but like, we can't, this is not working.
Yeah.
And so I think it's okay to acknowledge those beautiful parts and to have gratitude, because clearly you ended up in that situation for a reason. And even though, there was good and bad that came out of it, like, I'm sure you learned so much from that.
Yes, I am really grateful for the experience for so many reasons. I think just being able to connect with the other facilitators, like, I feel like I have, like, family members for life, and just learning what not to do, like, and what to look out for. Like, my intuition with that is like so strong now, like, I feel like I can spot it a mile away. And like, there have been like probably 2 or 3 other times since then that I've come across people that are in those positions of, they hold medicine ceremonies, and specifically men, and they are not in integrity at all with what they are projecting towards me, is what I'll call it. So to be able to recognize that immediately, you know, within like the first 30 minutes of speaking with someone to like a week to speaking with them and being like, you know what, I've seen this before, you know, and like having that inner trust of like, that's not for me.
This is so important because this, unfortunately, is all too common, especially nowadays where ayahuasca and all sorts of different medicines are coming online in a bigger way. There's people who get this ego about them and they're like, I want to be a shaman. Like, I'm going to serve ayahuasca. And then it can be really dangerous. And like, this isn't even just Western people, like this happens in the jungle too. And I think that's important to talk about because I mean, there's a guy, his name's Hamilton Souther, I don't know how to say his last name. I've heard podcasts with him where he was studying with the medicine like 20 years ago, like 15, 20 years ago, when nobody was going to the jungle. And he went to Peru and literally just was like talking to people in the street and was like, hey, like, I don't know exactly how it happened, but it was like a random person was like, hey, you want to come sit with ayahuasca? Like, so he goes deep into the jungle and like red flags, so many red flags. So he just goes with these random people and sits with ayahuasca. And especially in those days, it wasn't that common for Westerners, white people, to go and like sit with the medicine. So they see this guy's like, oh, this gringo, like he doesn't know what the fuck is going on, like, and they literally like there was like black magic and things going on, and he had to, over a span of years, had to sit with other shamans who like really knew what they were doing to undo this twisted black magic that was happening to him. And so I just think it's really important. And I mean, I've just heard I've heard so many stories of just abuse and even like sexual abuse and things happening in ceremonies, which is just like, it's so heartbreaking. And I don't say any of this to put fear into anyone because that's not the purpose. The purpose is to be like, these things can happen and it can really, really give you a lot of like fucked up shit in your life. The karma that somebody will incur from using sacred medicines to abuse people is lifetimes and lifetimes worth. Like that's really dark. And to me, it's like one of the worst things that you can possibly do as a human, to use a medicine that is so sacred and like literally given to us as a gift from the earth and use it to hurt people. You're going to be working through that for a long time because that's not okay.
It shows up in the space too. That's something that I think you can kind of feel energetically when like it's not a clean space, because, you know, in that experience, it was like very, very dark, very, very, I want to say like grimy, you know, like the actual ceremony pieces itself, you know, a lot of people had struggled with like demonic energies and like just kind of like digging these holes to hell. And that was like every ceremony and like almost everybody's experience of just like being thrown into this really dark, low vibrational space, because the person that is holding the space is that's there every day, you know. And so I think like the mental health of that person holding the space is going to obviously be reflected. The karma that they've been accruing over the many years of like using these medicines out of integrity, that's going to show up in the space. It's going to show up in their daily lives. And that's like some energy that you really just don't want in your life, like at all.
I don't think we realize, or some people I'm sure do, but I don't think a lot of people realize how important the facilitator is, because the facilitator is, they're affecting the entire space with their energy. They're holding this container. And so if your energy is not right, and if you're working with like dark stuff, and you know, we all go through dark times like that, it's part of life. But it's like, if you're in this place of like narcissism or like just abusing people, it's going to show up. in the space.
Absolutely. And like the mental health aspect that goes with that, of like, I think being able to reflect and being able to say, hey, I'm not feeling like I'm able to hold this space right now. That is like huge. If I hear somebody say that, it's never like a, oh my God, are you serious? It's like, thank you. Thank you for recognizing that you have to take time off from holding space from people. Take time off to work on yourself so that you can hold space for people. As humans, like we can only hold so much. And so it's normal to have breakdowns, and it's normal for you to be like, this is this is a lot. Like that's normal. What's not normal is not healing that and continuing to serve people. It's not normal to not take care of yourself and continue to serve people. To me, that is like the sign of a true leader. Somebody that can humbly be like, I'm going to take a minute.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to do that. You have a lot of responsibility put on you, but to be in that place of humility is like so key when like working with these medicines and serving other people.
Yeah, and that's a sign of a true integral facilitator. Like to be able to take your ego out of it and to put your pride to the side and be like, hey, I actually got to do my own work right now. Like I'm actually not in the best space to maybe hold this right now. Or even like, people can still hold it, like even when they're going through shit, but it's like it gets to a certain point where it's like you have to actually work through your shit now in order to be a good space holder within
Right.
any kind of capacity. It's inspiring to see that because it's so easy to put someone on a pedestal, especially when they're in that place of authority, like in the medicine. It's so easy to be like, oh, they're perfect and they don't have any problems and like everything is just great in their lives and they never struggle with anything and they don't have any trauma. And like, no,
Oh my
like we all have shit that we're struggling with. I think a lot of people in any type of leadership role, like I see it with spiritual influencers on social media or, in the shamanic space, but any type of leadership role, it's so easy to get that ego about you and be like, I'm
right.
so much better than all of you because I've done all this work. And so I just want anyone who is feeling called to sit with the medicine to know what to look out for and to know what are the signs of like a good, safe, healthy facilitator and what are the signs of like not a safe facilitator. So I think that would be a good place to kind of move into. What are some signs of a facilitator that is maybe not in integrity or not someone you want to sit with?
Yeah, yeah. So I think one of the most important things, the first thing that comes to my mind is something we touched on briefly, is bodily autonomy, of being in control and being able to make your own decisions in the space. Um, you know, if you say no, you shouldn't be coerced into anything if you're saying no. That goes for the medicine space and everyday life. So yeah, just making sure that you are able to do that, and say no and say yes and make your own decisions of like how much medicine you're drinking, or if you want to leave the room for a moment. And like with, all due grace, like the guardians, the people helping and assisting will, they might tell you to do something if you need to do it, in certain situations. But I think we can all use like our intuition of like when that's okay and when that's not okay.
Right.
um and I think like how are they treating the people around them? Are they gossiping about other people? I think gossiping and talking crap about people is like one of the lowest things, that it's just unnecessary, right? So somebody that's in a position of leadership, I don't personally believe should be spreading gossip of any kind, especially if it's your first time in the space with them. Even if it's your fifth time, 100th time in the space, it's like that is not the time or the place to be doing that in a ceremony. Are they open to feedback? Are they able to self reflect? If you go to them with a problem, even if it's about them, are they willing to talk about it? Or do they shut down with it? Do they not want to hear it? Do they, go to 8 other people and like, cause this big stir of drama? And I think, yeah, just like the overlook of like, how is their mental health? You know, I think we all go through a lot, especially people that hold medicine. I think it's like, it's part of it, you know, it's a huge part of it so that we are able to hold the space. But letting it affect the space is not something that should be happening, you know, because otherwise you should be on the other side and you should be sitting and somebody should be facilitating for you. I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, I think things can get really messy and unclean if the facilitator is not doing their own work, and that type of thing can happen from someone who's they're a good person and they want to do good, but it's like maybe there's a pattern playing out of like I'm taking care of other people more than I'm taking care of myself. And so that's a big one. The facilitator doing their own work. And yeah, like you said, we all go through shit sometimes, but being able to still come to the facilitator chair and be like, nope, this is not the place for that. You know, I'm not going to project my shit into everyone else. That's really big. And there is so much nuance to so many everything, but there's so much nuance because like you said, the bodily autonomy is huge. And also, like you said, being able to use your discernment is really important because there are some situations where you are in a safe container, but maybe in order for the container to be safe, like we need you to go sit down in your spot, you know, that
Right.
we need you to like come inside and be with all of us. Like, you know, I think it's really about discernment. No one should be forced to drink a shit ton of medicine if they don't want to, right? And you should have the space to be able to be like, I need to take a moment outside if I need to. I need to, you know, I want to be free to do what I want, but like within these boundaries, within this parameter, because that is the the facilitator and the guardian's job is to
Mm-hmm.
hold a safe container, you know? So there's so much nuance. And I think, you know, just especially if it's, you know, you're getting ready to go sit with someone, you should be able to ask them questions, you know, any fears that you have, any curiosities. And I think the biggest thing of all of it is developing this sense of inner trust and intuition. Like if you get a weird feeling from someone, trust that.
Absolutely. I think, and it's hard, right? I think discernment is like a practice. I didn't even know what the word discernment meant until like last year, to be honest. I was like, I didn't know. But I think also to touch on, you know, the guardians and the team that is in the space is important as well. Um, you know, when I went to apprentice under her, I had sat once, you know, those 2 nights, so technically twice. And here I am in this position of like helping other people. And granted, my background, I think, is the reason why I was able to hold really great space, you know, but it's important to know, you know, how long has the team been working for this person? Are they all new? What is their background with the medicine? How long have they been studying? You know, kind of really like discern if this is like an open door, you know, like a revolving door. I'm sorry, like a revolving door of people in and out of this space, because that is kind of the case for that community where it's every year there's new people facilitating because everybody recognizes that it's not a good space and so they leave. And there's a lot of, you know, possible danger that goes with that, of like having inexperienced people, having people that, you know, the server doesn't even technically know very well. um you know, I know I've seen it before of just like not necessarily the most trustworthy people, you know, being given positions of a leadership or guardianship type of spot. And it can be scary, you know. It's really scary when you don't know somebody's background and you're ingesting a medicine and you don't necessarily have control over your body. And that's not to scare anybody, but that's also to like prepare you of like, make sure that you trust the space that you're in.
Yeah, that's so big. Like, I think it's so important. Just, I even think of like a workplace, if you're looking for a job and there's this place that has like a really high turnover rate and there's just employees coming and going, that's a red flag. Like, there's a reason for that. And I think man, that could just get really unsafe to have people who are very new to the medicine, and then you're now putting them in this role where they have to show up and they have to help, and like clearly this probably isn't your first lifetime doing this kind of work, so
Right.
in a way you had that energy about you already, but it's also not fair to you or to someone else in that position because you didn't have enough time to really sink in and do your own work and get to know the medicine in that deep way, because things change. Like, it changes when you step into a facilitator or leadership role. I've experienced that even just with the mushrooms, like
Right.
my experience facilitating them is very different than just doing my own work. And both are beautiful and valuable, but it's like, yeah, that especially with ayahuasca, but with all medicines, it's really important to have that deep study under your belt, and to trust in your path. And everyone's path is different. Someone might sit for like 10 years before they ever step into a guardianship role, and then another person might sit for like 3-4 years, or I think there's room for nuance, and everyone's journey is going to be different and their experiences, but all of that is really important, and being able to ask those questions and have them be received. If you're coming to the facilitator and you're asking like, how long have you sat? How much experience do you have? Have you gone to the jungle? That's really important. Have you gone to the jungle and like learned from the indigenous elders? Have you gotten permission from the elders to serve this medicine? Like, as a white woman who is here talking about ayahuasca, like, I always want to reiterate the importance of that, that this is an ancestral medicine from the Amazon, and it is really important to have that respect and to study with the indigenous lineages who have been carrying this medicine for thousands of years, and to not think that like, oh yeah, I watched a couple ayahuasca documentaries, like I listened to some Icaros on YouTube, I think I could serve the medicine. Like, no, like that, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so
dude, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that, especially as ayahuasca gets more traction in like just, the media. And like, I mean, when I sat, it wasn't big, it wasn't like, I like scroll through Instagram and see ads now, and I'm like, this is mind blowing to me. But it's like all the more reason to like have these kinds of conversations, because it's out there, and there's a lot of people that see the money that is potentially could be made from this, including people from Peru, Brazil, like, the people that come from these areas. And like you said before, like they might not necessarily be in integrity either. So
yeah, and I also, if anyone wants to go deeper like into what to really do to find like a really safe facilitator and safe place to go, I have another podcast episode that I recorded. I'm trying to remember the name. It was like how to get the most out of your psychedelic journey or something like that. Where I really dive into what to look for, what questions to ask and things like that. So definitely go and check that out. But yeah, that's a really good point. And I've heard indigenous people say this, that, I think Westerners we can have these rose-colored glasses when it comes to indigenous people, and they're people too. And they're just, they live a very different lifestyle, but there are people in the jungle who are not safe or not in integrity as well. And there's plenty of them who are. And so it's just important to like, wherever you're going, make sure that maybe like ideally, someone who's gone there, someone that you trust has gone there, and they're like, this is safe, this is good, but at the very least, like, let them have a lot of good evidence and like reviews, things to show that, it's a safe place.
Yeah, like, and just to touch on that briefly, um, and don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% sure, but when I was looking into dietas, I did come across like this website, of somebody out in Peru, I believe it was. And when you go out for dieta and you pick a specific plant that you want to diet with, that you work with, and you form a connection with that plant specifically, and this website was offering a kind of brew of all brews, right? And they had like over 60 different plants, including the master plants, all together in this one brew. And it was like at this ridiculously expensive price. And they were like, if you want to kind of like basically cut corners and just get this done all at once and like have this mega brew, we've got you. And I'm just like, this was a while ago, and I was like, I don't know if that is how it's supposed to go. I'm like, that, number one, that sounds really intense, right? I was like, I think I might want to go a little slower. Number two, if we're supposed to be connecting, how could you connect with 50 plants all at once and not feel overwhelmed? The lessons that are coming from the plants, how do you know which plant is giving you that lesson? And so it was like almost like a too good to be true, fast pace, pay X amount and get a certification type of deal.
Yeah.
So just like being aware of things like that, where like if you have to question it, or like something in your heart is like popping off, like listen to that.
Yeah, that's a lot. And it's sad, when you add money into these kind of things, like obviously medicine carriers deserve to be paid and compensated for their work. Like this is important work, and I'm definitely not of the belief that like, oh, if you're doing spiritual work, then you should just be doing it and be broke and poor and hungry. No, I don't agree with that, but it's also like, and I've seen it myself, people who will just charge like a crazy amount of money for medicine, all different kinds of medicine, just because they can, or like these kind of crazy things that you've explained. Like, bro, it reminds me of I've seen an ad on Instagram or something for this, like, it's like church of like, it was, I can't remember what it was called. It was like dimethyloxin or something. Bro, it's like they're serving ayahuasca and mushrooms at the same time. Like it's just like crazy stuff, bro. And I heard,
Yeah. Oh my.
I listen to a lot of comedian podcasts, and so I was listening to one with Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer a while back, and Tom Segura was saying how he had this experience where he drank ayahuasca with these people. It was just, it sounded so weird. It was like so many red flags. He said he drank ayahuasca and then they served him mushrooms and then they left him in a room alone for like hours and hours. And luckily for him, he said that he had a beautiful experience, but I'm just like, there's just so many red flags going off in my head.
He paid them for that?
Yeah, he sure did.
By himself.
He sure did. Like, just give me the medicine. I'll fucking, if you're gonna do
like,
that.
dude, you're doing it wrong. Just letting you know.
Like the whole point of having a facilitator is for them to be there and hold the space and support you
Right.
and like sing songs to you, not to like leave you in your bedroom alone with the medicine and they
Like,
go
all
out and
pressed.
they're like playing fucking Call of Duty in the living room. And you're just like, you're having the deepest experience of your life,
Oh
and
my
you feel like you're gonna die and you're by yourself. Like, it's just crazy.
Damn, that's very rogue, man. That's rogue. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
but see, like, that's the thing. Like, anybody can do that. Anybody can make a brew and give it to somebody and press play. It's so dangerous. Like, there's so much that can come from that. And like, that is an experience in itself, but it's not always easy to catch, It's like, you really have to like discern.
Yeah, it's really important. And this is like the whole reason why I even started this podcast, is because there's like so much information out there. And I just think it's really important for people to have this knowledge, people who are curious about psychedelics, to know that these things can happen, and you shouldn't just go just with anybody to
Right.
sit with any kind of medicine, because it can just end up really dangerous, and you can put yourself in a situation where you're way more traumatized than you came in. There was one other thing I wanted to say from earlier. You were talking about how like the ceremonies could get really chaotic, and it's interesting because that can happen sometimes. That like ayahuasca can sometimes like chaos can erupt, but the sign of a true embodied integral facilitator is being able to like hold it and then bring it back in. We've had that happen in ceremonies before where like shit starts popping off and it feels like a little
Yeah.
crazy. Like I said, the sign of the true facilitator is they can be like, okay, nope, it's cool. Like chaos is a thing in the universe. It happens
Yeah.
and sometimes it's needed. But to be able to rein it in and like bring it back into this structure, it's really important. And it's a big sign of, someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the reining it back in part, because I think anybody can, like, it's ayahuasca, like, shit's probably going to pop off, like it's just part of that kind of medicine. It can be intense, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the beautiful part of it is that it allows you to like process this incredibly deep, trauma that you've had, and it comes out in like the craziest ways sometimes, like one minute I'll be hissing like a snake in the corner, and like the next, my body is shaking all over the place. Like it's different every time. And I think what's beautiful about the space that we go to now is it's like a slow rise to the chaos. It's not 2 seconds later and all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? It's like a very like smooth flow of intentional chaos. Like there's a
Mm.
purpose to the chaos. There's, leading up to this big release. And typically everybody in the room is kind of flowing in the same kind of direction, and it's beautiful. I think it's like there's definitely a tact to it. I think it takes many years to be able to hold a space like that. And once you get to that point, and there's a little bit of chaos because everybody's releasing these crazy things and there's noises and there's a lot, the facilitation team like works beautifully. There's never any like, anybody without somebody if they need them. Like everything's taken care of. The community takes care of each other, and then it's brought back in. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just, okay, I got you guys here and now everybody's on their own and I'm going to sit in the corner and cry because I have trauma that I need to, get through, and I'm going to sit here with you guys and cry. Like, that's something that I experienced with my previous teacher of like, she has to press play on the CD because she's sitting there and like she's bawling her eyes out, and and it's like everybody is human, we all have things, absolutely. But when you step into that role and you take that position, like you should hold it.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like, and once again, there's so much nuance. And this is why I love podcasts, is because we can really get into the nuance. Because the medicine is still going to work on you regardless, But when you're saying like it's a pattern and it's like happening, or if it's like the whole ceremony and it's a normal occurrence, you haven't done enough of your own work, clearly,
Right.
to be able to sit in this spot. Because the medicine is also really intelligent. All the medicines are, because even like when I serve mushrooms, I'll have my own process, but I'm not just sitting here like flailing and crying and purging all over the place. I'm in my own process at the same time while I'm holding it,
Right.
And especially ayahuasca, she's beautiful and deep, and like shit can get wild, like you said, you might be hissing like a snake, like
Yeah.
I've been roaring like a lion, or like
Yeah.
you might do weird things with your body, like it's a very just primal state where it's like, yeah, things can be like what we might consider like not normal, or like you might
Right.
be like, oh, that's weird, like what's going on over there, but that's part of it within reason.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you feel like you want to touch on or bring up before we start to get to the end?
One of the things that comes to mind is like integration, and making sure that you have support during integration. I know from previous experiences, like at the end of ceremony, when there's like an integration circle and everybody is kind of sharing their experiences, I think there's a really big chance of trauma bonding with other people if that space is not run correctly. And I think that's kind of with any kind of circle, right? And it's, my experience from was very much like there was no time limit. There wasn't anything off limits. It was kind of just like a free for all, like everybody just express everything about their experience over the weekend, going deep into all of the hurts and like, sharing with this large group of people, like everything that they've been through. And so I think a lot of that was like the trauma bonding that started to happen between people in the community, where we would spend 4 hours in a room all just crying and talking about the bad things that we've been through in life. And now in this new community, it's like, with respect to everybody's experience, take the big pieces of what you learned and share it so that it can be medicine for other people. And I think that's really important and something that I really am grateful for, because I learned the difference and I was like, wow, we're not all just going to sit here and cry. And like, there's tears shed, of course, but it's like very therapeutic because we're not like diving into like, all of these really awful things when we're in such a sensitive spot, after doing medicine for 2 nights in a row. Everybody's really sensitive. So I think it's important for people to like also look at their integration circles afterwards as well.
Yeah, that's really, I never even thought of that. If you're just here like mulling over, oh, I've been through all these things, it can almost feed that energy and make it stronger, as opposed to being like, yeah, like I was really processing this hurt of this thing that happened from my childhood, but I transmuted it and I saw like the gift in it and the beauty. Like that's what it's about. It's not about just, oh my God, like my life has been so hard and it's, I've had all these horrible things happen to me, and it's about who you become through healing that, not being in victimhood or restating your trauma over and over and over.
Yeah, kind of just like staying stuck there. And that goes into like other areas of your life too. I had listened to this other podcast of some friends of mine, some previous facilitators that were also in the same space. And they had come out with a podcast about basically what we're talking about. And one of the things that they touched on that that has stuck with me since then is, are they medicine carriers or are they just musicians? And I think that is like huge, because I think we kind of lose sight when really great music is playing, right? And so like, somebody has a beautiful voice or somebody's really good at guitar. And so we just automatically kind of trust this person and put them on a pedestal of like, oh yeah, they're like so amazing. When you're in the medicine and you hear this beautiful music, it's like, that's amazing. But I think that there's something there, where it's like, I think to really use discernment of like, once again, like how studied is this person? Are they just pressing play on their guitar and like they don't really know how to hold the space energetically? They just know good music. So kind of like the backside of like what we were talking about before with the music.
It's so true, because there's a difference in being like a really good musician and being a medicine carrier and being able to hold this space and using the right frequencies to through the music. Like the gift of music and the knowledge of music can really help with that, but it's like the shamanic training that is necessary to be able to do this is really, really important. This has been so beautiful. I love you so much. And I really just want to thank you for being here and for sharing your story and for having the courage, because I know it's not easy. And for anyone listening who has potentially experienced shamanic abuse, like I really pray that you find the healing and the right teachers who can really help you to rewrite that and unravel that, because it could do a lot of damage to your life. And it happens a lot with new people too, you know, people who are not as experienced with the medicines. It makes me sad to think that people are coming to ayahuasca or mushrooms and they're having these traumatic experiences and then they think that's what the medicine is when it's not.
It's difficult. I think it's taken me a long time to work through the views and my relationship with the medicine since being in that place. But it is possible, you know, like finding a good community and finding a teacher that is going to help you through that. And so hopefully this gets out to people.
I believe that I will. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Akasha. I love you so much.
I love you too. Thank you.
Yes, and if you want to share your socials, like what is you doing out here, tell everybody how they can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, so right now I would say maybe just my Instagram, Akasha underscore Kimeya. I am going to be offering one-on-one containers for mushroom ceremony soon. That's coming up. As well as crisis counseling, since I'm a crisis counselor. So yeah, the offerings are coming up. You know, I have some art that I'm going to be sharing, so just keep an eye out.
Definitely go and follow her. I'll link her page and the show notes. And thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. We love you and hope you have a blessed day.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment letting me know how you liked this episode. And if you have topic suggestions for future episodes, feel free to leave them in the comments there. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, it would really help me out if you could leave me a nice review, letting me know how you like the podcast so far. Thank you so much and stay blessed.